Help it.
Cheers.
The last of
Cheers.
the gin tonic.
Oh, baby. Cheers to you while I'm
Yeah.
having the I hope not last of the rosé, because that would be really sad. Cheers, you guys. Welcome to
Cheers. Creative happy hour
Where We Get Drunk.
on the creative possibilities.
Every week that looks exactly like the week before it, with you bitches, our little creative bitches who better be being goddamn creative, because I feel not very creative this week.
Yeah.
And which is perfect, because we're talking about, what are we talking about, Micah?
Resistance.
Resistance. And we're not
Something
talking
that I
about like,
know a lot about.
right? We're not talking about the resistance, like the cool thing, like people in like, masks and shit doing cool stuff. We're not talking about that. We're talking
Resist.
yeah, we're not resisting.
No, we're not talking about that.
We are wearing masks sometimes, but that's not that kind of mask. We're talking about the resistance that happens when there's something blocking you from that creative thing that you want to do. And we'll tell you guys about resistance, what resistance is, who came up with that shit, what it means for you, how to get over it. And we should also, at the end, I think it'd be kind of fun to have like a bunch of artists and creatives who probably experienced resistance until a later point in their career and didn't start being really creative until they were older. Sadly for us, none of them are quite as old as us, but well, maybe a few, but that's fine. As they say, it's not a race, it's a contest, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a, I don't know what it is.
Right.
I have lots of resistance.
Oh yeah. Well, we're going to be talking all about it. So my rosé is La Vieille Ferme. It's the one from Trader Joe's you can get for like $7.99, because that's the way I roll these days. It's quite lovely. It's serviceable. Your gin and tonic is made with what kind of
It's just
gin?
the Hendrix, the same Hendrix bottle that I've had going, and then some cheap ass tonic water from Trader Joe's and a lemon.
We're getting that way where we're like cheap ass wine, cheap ass tonic. Life is good. Hey, I'm not going to complain. Much needed. I've been battling as usual, facing my resistance. So what do you want? What's the most important thing that you want to say about resistance? Maybe to just kind of launch us off on the resistance.
The most important thing, so from what I understand from reading The War of Art.
Right. So we should probably tell everybody that Steven Pressfield basically came up with this, and then it was adopted by Seth Godin and a bunch of other people. But I think Nietzsche had the idea of resistance first, right?
Yeah. I mean, it can be thought of almost as like a force in the universe that you have to overcome, and you have to do it, methodically and consistently in order to really break through it. So, I mean, it can be anything from like overeating or avoiding doing your work, anything that keeps you from that makes you avoid doing your work.
Right.
It can be anything that distracts you from that you're like, oh, I have to do this, I have to do that. And it keeps you from doing what you're supposed to be doing, or what you want to truly
do. Yeah. Well, one of the interesting things that Steven Pressfield actually said, I believe he said, or I'm making it up and it sounds really freaking good, so we're just going to go with it, is that he says that where there is resistance, it's actually good, because that means that where there is resistance, there is a dream, right? You wouldn't have this resistance if you weren't facing something that was really important to you and therefore a little bit scary to you.
It kind of challenges you.
Yeah, it challenges you, and it is frightening, because people have the fear of failure, but they also have the fear of success, and they have the fear of exposure. Multiple fears, and we've talked about fears before, but I think that those are major things. And then of course the excuses just add to the whole resistance thing. But like the other thing that I thought was interesting with the idea of resistance is basically Steven Pressfield was saying that like we're not that special, that like even though you are creating your own resistance in a way, it's also this force in the universe. So it's not like unique. It's like this generalized force that kind of hits everyone. And so, you can't be like, oh, I'm uber special because I have resistance. Like basically everybody kind of feels it, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's like gravity. You're not going to float around because you have gravity holding you down, right?
Right.
So, you've got resistance, and you're constantly kind of defying gravity too,
Yeah. Yeah, just when I get up in the morning, I feel like it's an
like,
uphill
fuck.
battle.
Yeah, and gravity gets harder as you get older.
It
So,
really does. I wonder, but I think that resistance, however, does not. I think that resistance, like if you kept going in your same way, I think that resistance might get more and more fixed, right, as you get older. But I think that if you keep fighting resistance all the time
mhm.
and you keep
Mhm.
challenging resistance, I think that as
Yeah.
you go, and I think that that's why you have a lot of artists who truly kind of go beyond, their kind of basic bullshit as they get older. Cause I think that they overcome the parts of resistance that were, kind of I mean, I think all resistance is kind of bullshit, but like it feels like it's very real, right? But I think that
Mhm.
you start to push, push, push until you're like, I'm not going to let this resistance impact my dream. I'm not going to let this resistance keep me from doing my work, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been battling. I'm sure, and I want to hear a story or stories plural because you're our storyteller, extraordinary. I want to hear some stories about you and how you've overcome, resistance in various parts of your life. But I just wanted to share because thank God she's not going to be listening. One of the people from my writing group, I was having a conversation with her today, and I'm like, "Can you write?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I mean, this is like the biggest challenge that I've had is trying to push this one person to write. And
Right.
she has like resistance extraordinaire. I mean, is absolutely crazy. And she's
Are you
got,
talking about me?
no, I'm not.
I'm
I'm
just
not, I'm
kidding.
not that passive aggressive. I would tell you, right, bitch.
I'm
Well,
not even I'm not even I'm not I don't even identify as a writer yet.
well,
I have a
yes,
growth mindset. I
yes,
have a
you
growth
do.
mindset.
And I think that you've got so many stories to tell.
Mm.
And I love that you're in the writing group. But I mean, you have taken steps that already are making you uncomfortable, and that's great and fine. Like just stretch that out, right? Like it's like jeans, right? That are too tight. Like stretch them out a little bit. If you stretch them out too much at first, they're going to tear, right? So you need to like, wedge that ass in. Then you do the zipper up, So, but this one's been in my writing group for a long time, and she has so much.
Mm.
She's heard it all. She's heard all the logic, but the resistance is so freaking strong. I mean, she will come up with absolutely like every single excuse in the book. And I know that it's really important to her to write her thing, but I'm like, why are you doing this to yourself? I mean, I don't know. Have you
Yeah.
thought about like why? Why resistance? What purpose does it serve in this universe? Because I can't figure it out.
I think it's just it's like a doorway into the unknown, and I think humans are creatures of habit, and we really like to have a sense of control in our environment. And when you
Yeah, that was probably evolutionary, I'm guessing.
yeah, I mean, I think when you are doing a creative project or you're trying to accomplish something, you don't know how it's going to go. I mean, you just
Yeah,
don't know if like, and if you're in a like a class during a semester, you know that the semester is 6 weeks long or however long, 8 weeks long, and you have a period of time, you have a number of assignments.
yeah, you've got the end
They
date, you've got the
usually have
goals.
parameters. They tell
Mhm.
you how to do it. They give you the um the material, so you know how to research, you know what to do. When you have your own creative project, it's open ended.
Yeah,
So
very much.
there's no like, unless I think what happens with writers once they become successful writers, then they're kind of locked in with publishing companies and editors, and they're like, okay, you have a book deal, we need your book by this time.
Right.
Then you're on
Yeah,
some deadlines. But when you're doing, an initial project like that, it's kind of open ended. And if you've never done it,
yeah.
then you don't know what it like. You don't know what the other side is like. So you're
Totally.
always kind of like
Yeah.
inching your
Well,
way.
well, that's what so in my book about writer's block, I talk about that. I talk about creating a roadmap for success because
Mhm.
if you don't have a map, if you don't have a roadmap, or if you don't have the address for like where you're going, your GPS isn't
Mhm.
going to help you at all, right? You need to construct some endpoints, even if they're just along the way, but you need to create that roadmap for yourself because if not, I think the resistance is that much stronger because you can't celebrate any kind of achievement if the project's like loosey goosey open ended and we'll see what happens but I expect it to be great, like I think that becomes really really tough. When you just let yourself, like when your project, like I think that this doesn't happen if you're just playing with something, if you're like I'm going to make a vision board and it's going to be fun, like I don't think there's any resistance to that because there's no scary part to it, right? But if you're like, I
Yeah.
need to make an illustration that's going to be in this article, that's going to be in this magazine, and there's no real deadline, but I've just been told I
Mhm.
should do it. Like that's where all of a sudden you're like, wait, but what if it's not good enough? And what is it supposed to look like?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I agree. And, I think about, just times in my life where I've had resistance. But I think what happens is, in most of the things that I've accomplished, like going, getting my bachelor's degree it was a challenge because I didn't have any help from my parents, and I was working while I was going to school, and I was, I'd work, I'd take classes, I was exhausted. But I think the desire to accomplish the goal has to be stronger than the resistance itself, right? And
Yeah, I think you need to really explore what that desire is, what your motivations are. Because if your motivations aren't clear, if that dream isn't like crystal clear and the
yeah,
motivations aren't clear and the desire isn't clear, yeah, why would you do it? Why would you step out of the comfort zone and, into the unknown? I mean, that's scary. There's got to be a reason to do it, right? And I mean, like, oh,
and
yeah,
well, and I think once you've done that a number of times in your
yes,
life,
yes,
if you invested a lot of energy and then you didn't get a lot of return on it, then I think it can backfire on you in the sense that you're like, oh, I'm going to put all that work into it, and I'm not really going to get out of it
right.
what I thought I was investing, right?
Mhm.
And I bring up, my bachelor's degree because I spent years working on that, and focusing on, like, I got to get my bachelor's, I got to get my bachelor's degree. And then when I was done, the first thing I did was apply to graduate school, and it was like I could never really solve the problem of why I was doing it. Like, I
Yeah.
knew that, and when it came down to it, it was a self-esteem ambition. It was like I
Well,
needed to have a college degree
right.
because of my background. I needed to not be a white trash hillbilly. And for me, having a college degree was a ticket to prove that I'm not a white trash hillbilly.
Well, I love
And
that.
so,
Even though that's not, that's not like reality or that's not necessary,
yeah.
but that was your reality and that
Mm,
was something that was driving you. Like I think that was very clear for you and that's why you kept going. Even if after you were done, I'm pretty sure you're like, "Huh. Well, that didn't exactly achieve what I thought it would."
right.
However, you learned that you could do these things. You could force yourself to do something and I think that each thing that you achieve, like every single time that you overcome the initial resistance of like, I don't have the money, I don't have the
Yeah.
time, this is really exhausting. I think when you like overcome that, then every other new project that you have like actually gets a little bit easier, I think. And
Oh,
I
it's
think that,
kind of like when you first have a child and you stay up night after night after night nursing, and they're screaming and they're not sleeping, and you haven't slept for weeks and then months, and then for me it turned into years. Then all of a sudden it's like, you know, when you don't get a good night's sleep and you go to work, you're like, fuck, I'm tired. But after you go through like the boot camp of motherhood, you're like, whatever, I can do anything on no sleep,
oh,
right? Like
exactly. Yeah.
you have this leveled up ability to deal with something that
Yeah.
maybe you couldn't cope with before.
100%, 100%. And then you were mentioning that a lot of people who do like these creative projects and it doesn't work out the way they thought and they didn't get the success they wanted or they didn't get the outcome they wanted. But I mean,
Right.
I would postulate that so many times we claim we did everything we could and we claim that we did our best. And really we have to turn it around and look and be like, no, we didn't. We did the strict minimum to get our thing done. And maybe next time, if we put in a little bit more, there's going to be more. Like you can't keep doing the same thing and expect a different outcome, right? That would be absolutely
Well,
nutty.
yeah, and I also think that, the other thing that Steven Pressfield talks about is going pro.
Mhm.
So when you're initially writing, you know, sure, you can put words together and sentences together, but I'm sure to write something really, really good, you have to practice it a lot, and maybe your
I think
first,
not even just practice. I think you need to look at the world in a different way. Like that's the
yeah,
thing. Like you need to stop thinking that you're the center of the world. You need to think more of what you're doing and not about the ego that's, kind of pushing you, because you need to
Yeah.
be doing something creative for the sake of the creative thing that you're doing, and not to you feel a certain way, or that have a certain status or something like that. So many people will write something and they will let their ego guide them to where they're blind to what the shortcomings of their work actually is. And I think that
Yeah.
once you get the
But I
ego
guess
out
it's
of
like,
the way.
how many of those authors that you're like, oh, you they have some best-selling novel, and then you realize that they have like 6 books before that you've never even heard
Yes.
of them
Oh,
before.
totally. Oh,
And,
absolutely.
and
I mean,
so,
look at Toni
and you
Morrison,
realize
you
that's
know.
the process, right?
Yeah,
You know?
that can be the process. And then, but then you've got some people who went through the process without writing a full book. People who went through a process of just the psychological and creative inner work that means that they kind of came out with something kind of fully cooked, without having to do the rote kind of practice. Like, I'm sure you found this, no
Mhm.
doubt, and I found this with painting, for example. So, I've had this bizarre relationship with painting where I've had, a few art shows and I had a lot of success, but it didn't ever really feel like it didn't feel like it was genuine to me. Like, it didn't feel like that was my calling. It was just something that
Mhm.
I was doing pretty easily and that I was generally
Mhm.
pretty good at, but not, you know, but so I would stop painting for a really long time because I wasn't that driven to do it. And now it's
Right.
more like a fun release, or it's a fun, whatever pastime. But I find that since I'm learning to look more every time, and since I don't have so much of the ego wrapped up in it, because I really don't care, like, I just want to make it
Mhm.
something, you know what I mean? I
Mhm.
find that I improve every time I pick up the paintbrush, my painting's better because I've learned how to look. And I think with writing, if
Yeah.
you learn how to listen, you learn how to hear, you learn how to describe, you learn how to experience.
Yeah.
You don't need to sit there it's like they say, put your ass in the chair and do it. And that's the difference between going pro, is where you're just like, okay, well, I have to do it. But that's where you go from amateur to pro. But that doesn't necessarily mean that your talent level, goes up that much.
Mhm.
It just means that you're becoming more productive. Because, like, the productivity is where, like, kind of that intention gets put into action. And that's where you start actually having the work started. Because you can be creative as fuck, but if you're not being productive, you know,
Yeah.
do we, I mean, it's nice to talk to you, right? But it's not, you're not producing anything that's important in the world. Do you know what I mean?
Well, and Steven Pressfield says that, one of the ways to fight resistance is to sit. If you want to be a writer, you sit your ass in the chair
Yes,
every day and you write, and you don't read it, or you don't expect it to be good. You just
exactly.
write.
Good
You
or
have
not
to
doesn't matter.
write.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like, if you're a writer and you're not writing, then you're not a writer, right?
right.
You know,
Yeah,
write,
and there's that.
RIGHT.
Right, yeah, right. But other than that, there are the 2 steps. It's like, first you have to write the thing, then you have to make the thing kind of good enough to get some kind of attention, if that's what you want. Because, I mean,
Right.
you have some people who are like, "I wrote the book, period, end of story. I feel a sense of achievement. Next time, maybe I'll write a good book." And they break down the resistance that way by, like, leveling up when it comes to ambition of the project. Like,
Yeah.
so, you learn how to play something on the guitar. Well, first I'm going to learn something that's just like 3 different chords. Now I'm going to learn something
Yeah.
a bit more elaborate. Now I'm going to sing, like, so you can kind of do that. And I think you can break through resistance that way, of building upon, like, successes that you might have. I think that's a really great way of doing it. Just like these little tiny successes, like, look back and be like, damn, I did that. I feel really good about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. I think it's good to look back and, you know, kind of connect the dots and see, like, oh, I accomplished that thing.
Yeah.
And then kind of break it down in your mind, because we forget that we went through all these steps, right?
A
We
100%.
forget,
You don't remember all the
you
steps. Yeah.
couldn't take Chem 2 until you took Chem 1, right? There's
Mhm.
a sequence of events that have to happen
Yep.
for you to move to the next level.
There are
I
definitely
think
levels. Yeah.
I think people forget that, you got to do the steps.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. Like, so many people think, I think so many people look at the creative life. They look at creative entrepreneurship. They look at, art. They look at writing. They look at music, and they just think of the prodigy, or they just think of that miraculous exception to the rule who woke up one day, did a startup and made a gazillion dollars, or the person who woke up and wrote a symphony. And that is not what
Yeah.
the world is about. The world is about getting up every day, breaking down that little resistance of the day that's telling you like, oh, come on, just, don't do it today, and moving forward to where it's no longer a choice. And, but the
Yeah.
interesting thing is, here's what I want to say, because so many people, like, it's like a diet, or it's like an exercise regime. The hardest part is deciding to freaking do it. Once you're in it and you're just doing it, and there's no real choice involved. You're just going to keep doing it and moving forward, or you'll quit. Like, those are the two choices, but you no longer have that truly, truly difficult thing, which is like actually launching yourself from nothing
Yeah.
to this unknown that is starting this thing. Can I do it or not do it? Like, I don't know,
Well,
so.
and I think you have to have metaphoric kind of activities. So, and what I mean by that is, so we've been in this shelter in place for 2 months now.
So freaking odd.
Yeah. And, I kind of, right when it happened, I was like, okay, well, if we're not working for 2 weeks, I'm going to make a commitment to myself. One of the things that I've always wanted to do, we live in Marin County and it's just like hikes galore. I've always wanted to hike every day. Like, this is something that if I wasn't working my
Right.
day job, that's what I would do. I would hike every day. I would do all the other things that I love to do, and I have been, but I would hike.
Mhm.
So I kind of made that commitment. So every day, no matter what, and I think I've only missed 2 days.
Okay.
And that has been either due to the weather was too poor. I think one day, and many of the days that it rained, I hiked anyway. I
Right.
think one of them was just too windy and rainy.
And
And
also
then
sometimes
another,
there's a reward at the end of the road, literally.
yeah, there was some other, so I think of all this, so more than like 30, maybe almost 60 days now. I mean,
Yeah.
I've hiked and every day. And so what I mean by this metaphor is like, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to challenge myself to do more than 6 miles. And then I'm going to, then I would do 8 miles. And then yesterday I did 10 miles. And, you know, they, it's like, okay, well, whatever. You get a little stronger, you get some stamina, you're out in nature. It's super grounding and super, it helps you, build like this holistic health version of yourself.
Yeah.
However, it's a metaphor for, when you climb those hills and you set this goal of like, okay, I'm going to add 2 miles to my hike, and you do it, then you have the experience, a small goal setting where
Right.
you're like, wow, and then you can look at your mileage on your Fitbit and say, wow, I did 55 miles last week.
Yeah, totally, totally.
And
That I
you
like
have
that.
this reference point for
Yes.
what you're capable of,
So, like, I
right?
like your small goal setting. Like, for me, I've been working on this fucking course. So I published the book, a few weeks ago, and I've not promoted it that much yet because the course is coming and is attached to it. But these are things that I've been working on for so long. And, with this quarantine, I was like, I want to publish, and I kept giving myself
Yeah.
these deadlines, and the deadlines I couldn't make because it was just too much work. But at the same time, that didn't stop me. Like, I kept working, past the
Yeah.
deadline, going, okay, still have to finish it. Like I said, I would finish it. And I'm now like, it's within sight. I mean, it's within like couple days and this thing's going to be done, and I cannot believe it. And then I'll probably have a creative hangover, but
But
in the
don't you
midst.
think you have that range now?
Yes.
It's like there were
Yes.
days that you could only do 3 miles on the work
Right.
trail. And
Right.
then there were days that you did 10 or 12 miles.
Right.
And then if you did 5 or 6, you were like, oh, wow, I had a really productive day.
Right.
But you knew your range. You were like, okay, well, if I only did 3 pages, then I met my minimum goal.
Well,
But you,
for this, it was a little bit different because it was stuff that's kind of a steep learning curve for me. So I had to learn all the technology and stuff. So it was very
yeah.
frustrating. And so it's kind of a good analogy because it's like learning new skills, and learning new skills takes time. So
Mhm.
you don't know how long it's going to take, and you can't measure. You can't be like, oh, I learned
Yeah.
this much today. And, so it would be like by tasks, like, okay, I managed to do this. I managed to do that. I managed to push publish, today. Because every day was hours and hours and like 8 hours of work, for example, on all this stuff.
Yeah.
But in the midst of it, I was like, well, I'm pushing so hard, and like I've kind of gone beyond so much that I was like, might as well throw in a freaking keto diet, because why the hell not? You know what I mean? I was
Yeah,
able
why
to
not
break
just throw
down.
another wrench in? We're already in
Yeah,
a
because I was
pandemic.
like, well, I'm breaking down resistance every day anyway. I can probably sneak this in. And you know what? I feel like I have snuck it in, because I think that like the resistance meter was kind of like, wait, what just happened? Like, it's like, oh, do I push her
Yeah,
here, push her there? And, I think that if you're working really hard on a bunch of stuff, rather than trying to just focus on just one thing, I mean, focusing is good, but you can throw in some other challenges while you're at it. Like if you're working on a painting, why not work in like, learning a song, or, doing some hiking while you're at it? I mean, it's fine. You can add all those things in. It's just like the hours you have in the day and the energy that you have, but the resistance breaks down as you do. So I'm like, take
it
advantage,
does.
Yeah.
It does. And I think, also in that hiking metaphor, doing it every day builds this strength. And every day I'm like, ooh, I'm going to go out and do my hike. And every day I feel stronger and more capable of doing it.
Right.
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 And that's what happens with anything. You get more fit, you get more, you get better at doing it and pushing through. You're like, okay, I recognize this is a challenge.
Hmm.
I have to push through this, and
Right.
thinking
And
like,
yeah.
do I need to have a snack? Do I need to drink some water? Do I
Yeah,
need
what
some
do
water?
I need? Yeah, kind of like, yeah, it's like, what do I need to get me through this? And I think
Yeah.
that once you learn to stop making excuses, and like there's a thing that is, when you reward yourself with stuff that's bad for you, like, the people who are like, I'm going to write 3 pages and then I'm going to have a glass of vodka, or, I'm going to go on a hike and then I can have that donut. That's not productive. But when you start rewarding yourself with things that are kind of productive, where you're like, okay, I did this and therefore I'm going to let myself do that. Or I did this and therefore now I can do that. I earned the right to do this or that. I think
Mhm.
that's kind of major when you, just acknowledge and just give yourself that pat on the back. I think it's super, super major. So I wanted to talk about, because I think that we have the other issue with the resistance. Like one of the reasons
Mhm.
resistance is so freaking frustrating for a lot of people is that they feel like they're on a timer. You know what I mean? Like they
Mhm.
feel like it's a race to achieve something creative or business wise or success wise. And
Mhm.
it's not a race, it's a contest. Maybe like you need to finish, but it's not like time. It's not a timed thing. It feels that way. It feels like, oh my God, if I don't get, famous within a certain amount of time, like my life is over. Or if I don't succeed, if I don't become the next, great American author by the time I'm 25, I failed. And that's totally not true. But I think we've got this youth culture that's still very much alive in this country, and kind of the world. It's like the prodigies are the ones that people are impressed by. And
Yeah, we've done this whole. There's been this whole narrative about like, this, capitalistic, like pulled themselves up from their bootstraps and they did this thing and they were a genius and
mhm,
they struck it rich and they did this brilliant thing and like, and there's still this really big focus on people that have like become successful
yeah,
and they just like it came out of nowhere
yeah,
and it
and that's
doesn't
not
come out of
ever
nowhere.
right.
It
No,
doesn't come out of nowhere.
yeah, if it does, it's an absolute exception. But I mean, the majority of people work their butts off and they work through the resistance, for a really long time. And I kind of feel like, again, I feel like some of the people who've kind of overcome the resistance and become well known later in life, I feel like that's kind of more special because they know themselves better and they're kind of more realistic about what it takes. And like, I'm thinking about, for example, and the funny thing is like some of these people who are so famous for doing these kind of creative entrepreneurship or like,
Mm.
artistic, whatever. And you take it for granted that they've been around since they were a baby doing this stuff because they've been known for as long as we remember. But actually, they started like later in life. So, like Vera Wang, who I bet you think
Mhm.
she's been around forever, she started after the age of 40.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Martha
Yeah.
Stewart, 41, was the first time she ever did any kind of cookbook.
Oh,
41.
wow.
And it feels like
Huh.
Martha Stewart's been like,
But if you look back, and I think this is one of the reasons why I like biography because, like I'm reading the Hamilton biography right
I
now.
love biography stuff because it really shows you kind of the roadmap of what somebody
It
did.
like when you look at someone's life and they kind of put together, and again, they can't recreate somebody's life verbatim, but
No.
they put all the key points and you can see where they could have gone this way, or they could have gone that way, or they could have decided not to do that project, or they could have
100%.
decided not to push themselves to
100%. Yeah.
take that, next step. And I think when you read these stories and you see like Vera Wang and Martha Stewart, it's like, I'm sure if you look back in their history, everything that you can, connect the dots, everything was leading up to that tipping point where they were able to take that chance in that moment to go to the next level.
Yeah, it boils down to a chance, and it boils down to stepping out of your comfort zone. I mean, Martha Stewart could have been in her garden doing nothing, that whole time, and then she actually made the leap. And then, I mean, Leonard Cohen, I don't think was doing anything much until he was 30 or 40, 30s, like he was in his 30s. Before that, I think he was too self-conscious probably to be doing any of the stuff that he's doing, because he's not your traditional, handsome, pretty voice, singer, this and that. And I think that it took the self-awareness to be like, you know what, fuck it, I'm just going for it the way I am. Morgan Freeman, not traditionally attractive or anything else, but he was 52 years old when he had his first film role that was like a real big budget film. 52.
Wow.
And
well, even Patti Smith, I mean, she's known as a musician and a poet, but I mean, I think she was 45, I think, when she wrote her first little book, Wool Gathering. I think that was her. I don't know. I think she'd written some poetry books up to then, but to actually write a book, a story, and then now she's like a, New York Times bestselling author. And I think she's an incredible writer. But she even talks about in that little book, like, she was like, I was just, it was my 45th year. I had this opportunity to do this. I was freaked out. I didn't want to do it. I kept avoiding it. And she talks about resistance in that little book.
See, I love that. Like, I think there is that resistance, but I think that the more you resist, the more you have this idea of something that you're dying to do, but that you're resisting and you're scared, that fear and that resistance, really, they should be a tip off to the fact that it's actually kind of important to you. And that's why it makes me so sad when I see this writer that I brought up earlier in this episode. It makes me so sad because I know how important it is to her. And she's just getting more and more resistant. Like, she's just digging her heels in. Even though this is something she wants to do. It's not like I'm telling her to do something she doesn't want to do. She wants to. It's her dream. It is like her thing that she's so pleased, but she's fighting it every step of the way, or something's fighting her every step of the way. And what's going to happen?
That desire is going to have to overpower that resistance, and I think the other thing, that people have to understand is you have to recognize what you're dealing with is resistance, right?
100%.
You can't just be like, you have to recognize it.
Yeah, you can't believe your own excuses, because you're going to make up excuses that are anything but, I'm feeling this resistance, I'm feeling afraid. Like, those are the only two acceptable answers. Or I'm feeling lazy, like those are all things that are true. But if you're like, it's just not the right time right now, or I'm just too busy right now, or I don't have the right materials, or I don't have the right education, like, none of those things actually are valid excuses in the least. And every time you make an excuse, you're lying to yourself, and you're actually letting the resistance win. You're giving it more strength, and you're giving yourself less strength, because you're basically saying, this is all okay with me, but you're feeling shitty at the same time because you're lying, and you are. So that's pretty, that's pretty horrific. I think, I wish that our listeners would just, kind of look back and see the things that they've done, and then kind of learn the lessons from that, and just kind of use that as a springboard to break through. Because I know there's so many people, like the majority of creatives are being held back by some kind of resistance.
Oh, yeah.
Like, basically, when people think the odds of success are so low, they're low because it's hard to break through the resistance. Once you've broken through the resistance, then your success odds become astronomical, because you're doing the thing, you're being productive, you're producing, and you're doing the actions that it takes to push it through. And to, and to have success.
Well, and then you're having different conversations with people. So if you're an aspiring writer, then, you're having, I just finished my book. Do you want to check out a copy of it? Or, you're having a different conversation with people. You're having a conversation at a different level,
well, you're no longer
I'm a painter. Right. Oh, well, let me see some of your paintings.
Right. You're no longer aspiring. You're actually that.
you're actually having conversations about your own personal accomplishment,
Yeah.
whether that leads to, stardom or, fame. I don't know. That's to be
That's
determined, right?
that's more pushing. It's more
But
pushing.
you're
Yeah.
gonna, I mean, you're still gonna grow old. You might as well, die trying.
I like what you said because that's exactly right. So many people think, "Oh, I didn't do it when I was young, therefore that's it." So that's exactly right. You're still going to grow old. Are you going to grow old and be lame, or are you going to grow old and be trying to do that
Well,
thing that you care
I
about?
told you the story about Dr. Eva Egger, who survived the concentration camp, and she was. I think I've already told this on another episode, but
Yeah.
she's like 88. She just wrote this book that, I mean, it's fantastic. It's New York Times bestseller, The Choice, and she hones this whole thing that we're talking about. Like, it's a choice every day, and she had worked her way up to, after surviving, nearly dying in a concentration camp, she had worked her way up to become a teacher in a middle school, and she was
Right.
talking to her principal, and she tells the principal, I think I want to get my PhD in clinical psychology, but I'm going to be 50 by the time I finish.
Yeah.
And her principal said, well, you're going to be 50 anyway.
Yeah. You're going to be 50 anyway. So do you want to
You're
be
going to be
50 and
50
not?
anyway.
Yeah. You want to be 50 and
So,
not have written your thing or painted your thing or done your, it's like that's the whole point. And I think that's kind of interesting. I
yeah.
mean, I was speaking to a numerologist of all things a
Oh,
while back. And she's like, well, so you're going to hit your stride in your career at 54. And at first I was just like, fuck, that's really old, And then I was like, okay, well, 54. Well, there's still lots of years to enjoy that,
Michelle Obama is 56.
Yeah, exactly. If I
And
can be like Michelle Obama, yeah, like
she's
that's
like
awesome,
a bombshell. Like,
right?
she's beautiful. She's successful. She just
Right.
wrote a fucking book. She's a badass.
Exactly. So I was like, oh, 54. I was like, that's not so bad. And I'm like, plus hitting my stride or becoming known at 54. Not that I believe 100% this thing, but you always like to, it was like the astrology thing. You always like to like listen to the things but I'm just like, okay, but those years between now and then doesn't mean I'm going to be this big old loser. It means I'm going to be kind of going up, up, up along the way, right? It doesn't mean like lame,
Yeah.
boom, 54. It means you're going to be building this thing that's going to mean that at 54 you finally have something to show for it, and I'm like, and that's
Yeah.
fine. That's something that I can do. I 100% believe it. Am I working my ass off? I completely am. But I thought that was kind of an interesting thing because we have such a culture of youth, and I really think that's one of the more destructive things with
I think
creative
so
today.
too. I mean, you don't want to be someone who peaks out in
Yeah,
high school or
no,
college. Like,
no.
I was a model in college. It's like, okay, well, you're ugly now. I mean,
It's
what,
really
like,
hard for people.
and fat. Like, what do like, do something else, like
Do
something
something
sustainable.
exact well, that's exactly like, I mean, if you were so for example, if you were a model, let's say you were a model
I mean,
in
no offense. Like, that's great. If you
right,
were,
no.
I'm just jealous because I've never been that pretty, but, you know, or that skinny. But,
No, but for example, here's the thing. Like if you were a model at some point, that means you broke through some kind of resistance, right? You broke through the resistance to put yourself out there and be like, okay, I'm going to go see the agencies. I'm going to get discovered. I'm going to be, I'm going to be photographed. It's embarrassing. Like, I mean, I did it. I hated it, but it was something that really helped me out. Like dumb as it was, modeling is that thing that set me on my course of being like, I can do anything I want. So after I modeled, I went and I worked in the fashion industry, and then I went and I worked in magazines, and I did it at my art show. Like all of those things I wouldn't have done if I had not broken through that initial resistance of like, don't look at me. I have to hide myself. This is mortifying.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
each
yeah,
resistant block that you break through super helps. So if you were, kind of known as a DJ when you were 17, and then use that use that, even if it means
yeah.
using it to become an author later or a painter later. Like I think that creatively, anytime you break through any kind of resistance is going to feed you and like help those abilities.
Oh, totally. I mean, that's like, my daughter's been dancing at Marin Ballet for
Yeah.
10 years,
Mhm.
and maybe she's not that interested or interested at all in it anymore.
And
But,
maybe we're not paying for it anymore.
but, but it essentially was this, this aspect of her resume. I mean, it created this resume for
Yeah.
her to get into this art high school because, she may have been able to get in anyway. However, she wouldn't have placed in a higher level. She would, you know
Right.
what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, okay, you use that thing to get into this thing, and then you'll use that thing to get into the next
100%.
thing. I
It's
mean,
stepping
you
stones. It really is.
they're stepping stones, and you have to
You have
use
to
it.
see them for, yeah, you have to see them for what they are and not think that everything's disconnected. I mean, you can't think,
Right.
"Oh, I was an actor and now, I have to start all over." No, you're an actor. You can jump into being a musician or an author that much more easily. I mean, look at Patti Smith again, if we want to bring her up.
Totally.
She wouldn't have had that kind of success immediately if she hadn't had her previous experience.
No, I
So,
agree. I
yeah,
agree. She had already had
the breakthrough,
the
like when you say
experience of putting
breakthrough,
herself out there,
yep,
right? Which
completely.
I
Yep.
like. Writing is just so, like, it's such a vulnerable
Well,
practice.
right, and the fact that you feel so vulnerable and the fact that you feel that resistance and that fear does mean that there's a dream in there somewhere, like, there, and that's
Oh
what's
yeah, because there's
right?
like, I'm one of these people that, like, I will sing a song, however, like, even if I sound like a wounded animal, I will play a guitar. I will play my guitar and sing a song because I know that that's not
Right.
my talent, right? I'm
Right,
like,
like, that was
whatever. I
me
don't care what you
that
think.
was
I'm
me
doing it
right.
for fun.
Yeah, that was me
But
with
when it
painting,
comes,
like, I didn't care. I would do
yeah,
whatever because yeah.
but when it comes to thinking about writing something, I remember writing papers for college for my classes, my anthro classes, and I would torture myself.
Yeah, yeah.
And one time I saw my teacher had erased a plus, the plus, and he put minus.
Oh, no.
And I saw it. I had seen it, and like, he tried to cover it up. And so I went to his office hours, and I'm like, "What the hell, dude? Like, who cares? An A plus, A minus?" But for me, it was a discrepancy that.
Well, yeah. What
And
happened?
he was like, "Well, what?" He was like, "Well, what? Like, what else are you going to accomplish in my class if I just give you A pluses?" Like,
I hate that justification. I really do because I
I
think it's
mean,
kind of
it
yeah,
was really stupid, but
yeah.
I think he just wanted to have a conversation with me. Like, I was one of these shy students that never went to office hours, and it
He
got
wanted
me
a
to go to
reaction.
office. No, it got me to office hours because
Yeah.
I was one of these people that, like, I would, work really hard and stress out about my grades, but rarely did I go to office
Right.
hours unless, there was, like, that pissed me off.
That see, the being pissed off broke through your resistance. So maybe that's another lesson is that
Yeah.
if you get pissed at yourself or if you get pissed at something else or pissed at a circumstance, maybe that'll break through your resistance enough. Like
Yeah.
use any force that you can find, whether it's anger or
Yeah, go
fun or love
shopping
or
and
passion.
try clothes on in the dressing room, and all
Yeah.
of a sudden you'll be on a diet,
Yeah.
right?
Oh my God, totally.
Like, with the
Fear,
fluorescent lighting in
fear
those
and
dressing
disgust.
rooms,
Yeah, that'll
you're
break
like,
through it.
"I'm never eating again,
I
folks."
know. Though honestly, that's never really worked for me. Like that'll be like I just hate myself. But like what'll really set it off is some
I won't even
other
try
thing.
them on. I don't even
Yeah,
try 'em on.
no, no. But like for me, it'll be something more like this time where I was like, what else can I pile on my plate? And I was like, we'll pile this on, no big deal. Or like honestly, I'll get pissed about something and be like, this is repulsive. I'll never eat again, and then
Yeah,
that'll do it. It's like a completely exterior to the actual dieting or appearance thing. It has nothing to do with that. It's something complete. So find something like
yeah,
you might be surprised when you need to break through your resistance. You might be surprised as to what is that element that finally does get you to break through. It might seem unrelated, but it's probably related in some way. So I find that, kind of fascinating. But
yeah, alcoholics call it hitting bottom, you know? Like, what makes you hit bottom, right?
well,
We should
yeah.
know that because
Well,
we're
yeah.
alcoholics. No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly. No, but
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think hitting bottom. I know this psychotherapist, this Japanese psychotherapist, I think I've mentioned before on the show, who basically, when people say, I've hit rock bottom, he's like, oh, good. And they're like, is there a language barrier? This man is like telling me it's awesome that I just hit rock bottom. And he's like, no,
Yeah,
now you can push yourself off the bottom and rise up to the top all the faster. And he's got a point. Like, what are you going to do until you hit rock bottom? You don't know. You're not motivated enough. Like when you hit rock
you're
bottom, you find something
still,
that you like,
yeah, you're still trying to, like, you're still paddling. You're
and
like,
you're still
"Eh."
lying to yourself about where you are. You're like, no, no, I'm towards the top. But like you're
Yeah,
sinking. But
you're
you're like,
not.
no,
You're
I'm
really,
fine.
you're like, yeah, you're
Right.
almost to the bottom.
Right. So that I think that that's kind of useful too, is when you have that despair of being like, wow. And that's what I'm thinking for my writing group person. I'm thinking, how do I inflict some kind of despair on her? How do I get her to hit that rock bottom where she
Yeah.
finally
I
feels
don't, I
like,
don't
wow,
know. I mean, it comes down to, sometimes I feel like, and this is something that happens with parenting, I feel like sometimes when we get too invested in
I agree.
the feelings, then they don't have to feel them.
Yes,
So
I agree.
when we care about it more than they do, and it's not that she doesn't care about it more, it's just that if you're freaking out about it or you're pressuring her about it, then she doesn't have, like, she's like, oh, Karena's feeling all
Yeah.
of that. I can just be annoyed with Karena, right?
Yeah,
And
oh,
so
absolutely. Yeah, she
so she's not
exactly,
taking
it's my fault.
responsibility for
Right,
her own, responsibility in it. So I think sometimes you have to be like, okay, I get it. You'll be fine if you don't write anything. You'll
right,
be fine. You'll find something else that interests you.
right,
And the minute you stop caring about it, she's going to feel the heat of it on
right,
her own shoulders. And that's when her ass will get back in the chair.
right. Yeah, I kind of feel like probably just like praising the others and being like, "Oh, you guys did a great job," it's, I'm glad to have a few students who are doing well, others naturally won't do as well. And just be like, that's just the way things happen.
Yeah. And they've got
Sure.
other things going on. They're not that interested
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, and I think that's the thing where, like, if you really look at yourself and be
reverse psychology.
right, and it's not just reverse psychology because it is the absolute truth that she thinks she has other things going on. She has nothing else going on, but she thinks she does, and that's what so many people who have the resistance, like, they tell themselves these lies where they're like, "Oh, I'm justified in doing A, B, or C, or not doing A, B, or C," and that
Totally.
yeah,
Totally. I mean, I do it all the time,
right,
I have
right?
nothing going on. Well, not nothing, but
Not nothing, but no, but we all tend to. I just happen to be in a phase right now where I'm just, like, fired the fuck up, where I'm like,
yeah.
no more. Like now I refuse to have any like I'm sick of like I was sick of having resistance for so long where I'm just like, nope. Now I refuse it.
Yeah.
Now from now
Well, and
on.
I think you kind of have to choke down the resistance.
Yeah.
And I think everybody's timing is different in that
Yeah.
way, like how much they can stand, how much they can take. And, I'm a big fan of Karlov Nalsgaard, who wrote My Struggle and that 6-part insane, autobiographical series that he does, the Norwegian
Yeah.
author. And he, like, all through his youth, and when you read his books, you read about it, but he wanted to be a writer, wanted to be a writer, wanted to be a writer. And he dabbled with, like, writing music reviews for bands and, just that kind of thing. And then never really quite, like, just barely, pulling off his first couple novels. They
Right.
didn't do that well. And then, like, he was just like, I have to
I
do
have to
this. And,
do this.
and then
Yeah.
he obsessively, like, practically locked himself in a room and wrote
Yeah.
and wrote and wrote,
Yeah.
and it's like,
That's it. You have to get to that rock bottom. You really
and
do. You have
that's
to
the
get to that
thing
point.
that you can feel from
Yeah.
his writing, is that he just wanted, like, he wanted so badly to do it. And you get that, you feel the passion of it. I mean, I did anyway. And a lot of people
Yeah.
did, because it's,
I think that's a really good thing to take a look at. So we would recommend reading that, for example, to recognize what it is, that point when you're finally like, that's it, this has to happen. Even Claude Monet was in his 30s and he was kind of like, putzing around and never really doing that thing that was going to kind of make him famous. Alex Katz, same thing, for years and years was doing some bullshit, making excuses for not finishing this or that. And finally they hit that point where they're like, okay, I'm gonna do that thing that I do, and I'm not gonna compare myself to somebody else. It's like, this is me. This is
yeah,
I'm gonna break through the resistance and stop pretending to be somebody else and do the thing that's me. And that's where I think you really kind of level up, and that's super important. And I think, just again, I'm a firm believer, and if you keep pushing, 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 not just in the wrong direction, but like in all directions, and while being focused on your goal, I think success must happen. It has to happen, right? There's
yeah.
no more than at least what you were doing when you were sitting on your ass at the very minimum. So that's
Well, yeah. And success is one of those things that it's subjective. I mean,
yes,
it's not one of these things that's like, you know, just you're only successful if you make this income, or you're
right,
only successful if you get these awards and accolades. You're only successful if so and so reads it. It's like,
right,
success is one of these things that, like, success builds on itself. it's
completely.
it's it has that snowball effect.
Right. And like
right?
luck builds on itself and opportunities build on each other. That's what we were talking about before. So I completely agree with that. But my glass is completely empty, even though I'm very, it's like shit. And I think that we've probably filled our listeners' heads with our various theories and what we have to say. I think we gave everybody enough to think about when it comes to, resistance and how to break through it. We'd love to hear you guys if you have any, like if you're going through resistance right now, if you want to know, what resistance, looks like, sounds like, let us know. Any famous last words?
Just keep fighting the war of art.
Keep fighting the war of art, my friends. Absolutely. Well, listen, you guys, it was great chatting at you, and cheers, and we will see you next time.